I am Jadon Se, Golden Dragon of the Third Arc of Consciousness, and this is a message from the Dragon. Today's message, Discernment. Dear ones, you are heading into a time where there will be much confusion, upheaval, changes to your world. Yes, dear ones, some of these changes will seem marvelous, some will seem too good to be true, and others will be a bit frightening, perhaps make you a little nervous. The way that you will need to navigate through these times is with discernment. I do not speak of a mental analysis. I do not speak of a process where you compare everything you've ever heard and seen to what's happening now and weigh it mentally in your mind. No, dear ones. I am speaking of a process where your breathing begins to become a little gentler, a little more conscious, and you drop into your heart. Your heart knows more than you can possibly imagine with your human mind. Your heart is tied directly into your higher self, your greater beingness, God, the divine, if you wish. Your heart is a direct connection between you and your truth, with a capital T. This truth is what resonates in your beingness as the most appropriate, the most correct. This is not to say that your truth should ever be enforced upon another. It is simply your truth, your true north, your guiding star. And dear ones, as many changes happen in this your world, some of them will be confusing. There will be new financial systems. There will be new modes of healing. There will be new emerging technologies for abundant energies. There will be smart this and smart that, AI this and AI that. There will be quantum systems, quantum computing, quantum finances. All of this may seem a little bit like techno-babble at times, or just spiritual jargon, or language that is not necessarily clear to you. Dear ones, there is a way for you to navigate through these times with what we call discernment. When something is presented to you and you need to figure out whether or not this is the truth. You need to detect the BS, so to speak. It can be a mental process, yes, dear ones. We are not telling you to just throw your mind out the window. However, the mind takes time to form opinions of things. The mind takes time to analyze. The mind needs a database, memories, mental resources to compare with, in order to decide whether something is true or not. This is all good, and it should be so. However, dear ones, in these new emerging times, things will change so rapidly and so drastically at times that your mind will not really be able to catch up, so to speak. And in these situations, you will need discernment. You will need a way to check the truth. You will need a way to intend that only appropriate truths will enter your beingness. So, what is this discernment and how does it work? Well, dear ones, it's really quite simple. If you feel into a situation, there is an immediate answer that comes out of you. And then what so often happens is your mind tears it apart to see whether or not it could possibly be true. This is all well and good, dear ones. When a detective is trying to solve a crime, perhaps a big burglary or a murder even, The detective will gather information, will interview all parties related, and immediately will get a gut feeling or an intuition as to whether or not somebody is lying or deceiving or covering something up. And dear ones, they cannot simply bring that intuition to the judge, to the court, to the jury. They need to follow up on that intuition. So, this does not mean that every gut feeling is always correct. It does not mean that every gut feeling is ready for the courtroom, so to speak. It means that every intuition can prompt the analysis, can prompt the verification, can prompt a greater understanding. And so the detective will go through and check people's alibis, check people's statements for accuracy, corroborate with witnesses, etc. However, generally speaking, such actions are governed by the initial intuition, the initial discernment of what these witnesses were saying and doing, what their faces were betraying, what their body language looked like, etc., etc. There is not very often an immediate mental analysis that happens. There is an overall intuition or feeling based on the understanding of the heart, based on the knowingness of the detective, and based on the confidence the detective has in his or her intuition. Dear ones, this is a time to develop such discernment. And how do we do this? Well, if we take the example of the detective trying to solve a crime and interviewing the first witnesses, what happens so often is the witness will start telling their version of what happened, their version of events, or in some cases may start lying or trying to deceive or trying to tell half-truths so as not to incriminate themselves, etc. The detective is not thinking at this point. The detective is observing. So the step one in discernment is to observe and feel, to just be a witness, to be an observer. There are perhaps mental thoughts floating in and out during this process, but the main force of attention is on the actual testimony, not on the analysis at this point. And if the observer is focused enough and alert enough and attentive enough, he or she will feel a certain feeling from their heart. Either it will resonate as truth or it will resonate as deception of some kind. And, dear ones, as this feeling grows, the observer, this detective in this case, will feel into whether or not he or she needs to follow up on this information, whether or not this information needs to be fact-checked, so to speak, with more or less focus and intensity. Some facts will be on their face, reading as truthful and or not needing further scrutiny, and many of the other statements will need further scrutiny. Yes, dear ones. So, step one, as we said, is be the observer. Step two is feel what your heart is doing as this event is unfolding and you are observing it. How do you feel? Quickly, there is no delay in this. Your heart does not take time to feel. The feeling is immediate. Either the feeling is, I resonate with this, it feels true, it feels correct, or something does not feel right, something is incomplete here, something is amiss, maybe inappropriate. So, your step two is to trust your heart, trust your intuition, trust your feelings. And, as we have heard already, step three, This is where the mind kicks in, mental analysis, the groundwork, so to speak, crossing the I's, dotting the T's, checking the facts, checking against any deceptions, making sure that the statements were verified, the ones that are important. And dear ones, your heart will flag the ones that are important for your mind to follow up on. This, dear ones, is the process of discernment. Be calm, drop into your heart, observe and feel, and listen to your heart. Feel into it, dear ones. Does this resonate, or does something seem amiss? Then, the mental process of checking the facts, doing what you can in your 3D mental capacity, or perhaps even 4 and 5D mental capacity, doing what you can to verify and confirm. This is the process, dear ones. And as you are hearing these developments that are occurring throughout your world, perhaps a new financial system is being rolled out, and you need to know whether or not you can trust it, or whether it is a deception from dark forces trying to control humanity, or whether it is truly for the benefit of humanity, this new financial system. You will need to use those steps of discernment. The most important one to remember, dear ones, is that your heart does not take more than a half a second to either resonate or not with a statement or an experience. Feel your heart, and it will immediately know. If there is a delay, and you have to consider this for a moment, or it takes too long to feel into it, just know that your mind has now kicked in. Your mind has most likely taken over, and you will need to just drop back into your observerhood and see more before you move on. So discernment, dear ones, your world is changing so much. You will be seeing new technologies for beautiful, abundant energy, for healing. Med beds will even become a reality soon. Yes, dear ones. Your financial system will be completely overhauled within 6 to 8 months of your time on this world, give or take. You will not even be able to recognize. It will be so different and so much better, dear ones. Abundance will flow. This golden age has already become, and it is simply in the process of rolling out. And as it does, yes, dear ones, some of the dark beings of this world will continue to try to deceive. They'll do everything they can do to claw and scratch and hold their positions and try to cause confusion and chaos. But it will be just background noise at this point, dear ones. The cabal, the dark forces, the deep state, pick whatever words you wish to apply to these. Your psychopaths, your sociopaths, they can no longer operate in darkness, behind curtains as it were, as they once did. They are now exposed. Their networks are exposed. They are on the run, contemplating their surrender, or if they are not going to surrender, just carrying out their last acts of chaos. They are just sowing their last seeds of division, or trying to get a rise out of people. Do not fall for these, dear ones. This golden age will not be a time where racism is on the rise, where hatred or violence or fear or shame or bullying is on the rise. No, dear ones, this golden age is a time where it is so apparent and obvious when people do these things. And instead of being filled with outrage or consternation about these things, you will be filled with compassion. There are still those who have not learned their lessons. There are still those who need to have a little extra hand-holding to become beings of integrity, beings of truth, beings that are connected with a greater purpose. This will not be a time where your discernment will lead you into fear, will lead you into despair, or even any sort of depression. This will be a time where your discernment will guide you very faithfully into greater joy, greater abundance, greater compassion, greater gratitude for all of these wonderful new systems that are being created. You will delight in seeing people move into abundance. You will delight in having your hand in the process of rolling out these systems of abundance. You will delight in being creative, in dreaming such a better world, dreaming the details of this new emerging golden age. Yes, dear ones, it will be full of beauty, and you will create much of that beauty yourself. Hopefully by now it will be very obvious to you that your heart needs to lead from here. Your mind, of course, will still be there to protect and to verify and fact check, so to speak. We will still need to use critical thinking skills. However, the heart will be the leader now. Let your mind check all of those facts. Let your mind still protect from deceptions as it can, but let your heart be the main leader, knowing whether something is a truth or a deception to be verified by the mind. That is enough for this message. I am Jadon Se, in love with your discernment, in love with the connectedness of your hearts to what is your greater self.